Good evening again. So tonight's topic is influenza. So influenza is basically a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of different kinds of viruses that are underneath that one category of influenza. And the influenza virus population tends to change itself around a lot every year. In other words, it might start off as a particular virus in your body, and then by the time it makes it out to somebody else, there's a good chance that that virus has mutated and turned into a slightly different virus. So the rate at which these viruses mutate kind of changes up a little bit every year. Some viruses are a little bit more likely to mutate than others, and so that is one of the reasons why when the researchers here are looking at places around the world, such as Australia, hi Joe, and looking to see what kind of flu viruses are circulating in the southern hemisphere this season that are likely to jump around the world to our half of the world during our winter season. Sometimes the lag time between identifying that virus and then figuring out which is going to be the most likely strain to come out of all that, and having to create all these hundreds of thousands of vaccines, there's a little bit of a gap in time there. And during all that gap in time, guess what? The virus sometimes will mutate and change and shift itself around, and there it is. Yes. Influenza is the topic tonight. So it is really very widespread across the United States right now. I'm sure that many of you have probably seen some of the news reports on it. So hopefully I'll give you a little bit of extra information, a little something different than you're getting on the regular news channels tonight. So, of course, what are the risk factors for influenza? The number one risk factor is being around somebody who has had influenza recently. Now, unfortunately, basically the influenza virus can be spread most easily in the day or two before the person has symptoms. So before all the aching, sneezing, body aches, all that kind of stuff even happens at all, guess what? They're infectious. And that is one of the reasons why the flu virus spreads so quickly. Also, the first few days of infection are also particularly troublesome as well. A piece of news that has been being very popularly talked about these days is also some really relatively new research that shows that the flu virus itself, not only is it spread by the relatively large droplets that come out when you go, cough, 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 and all of that, but it's actually spread by those little tiny, tiny fine mist droplets that are just from breathing. So if anyone's been in a cold enough climate to where you go and you can see your breath, that is that really, really fine mist that comes out of all of us with that warm air. And that is just the mist of breathing that is the most infectious, is what they're finding out. So within about a few feet circumference around yourself, anybody who lands up in that circumference of a influenza infected person is at high risk of developing that themselves. So even if someone is quote unquote covering their cough, just by virtue of breathing, it spreads the mist. So that is one of the reasons why in healthcare facilities, and hopefully other places as well, when somebody is coming in with symptoms of the cough and the cold and things like that, one of the first things that they are offered by the front desk staff in many establishments is a mask. Please, if you're having these symptoms, wear it, because yes, they're annoying, yes, they're uncomfortable, but if you've got a virus, it captures really well that fine mist around your nose, and just a little bit leaks out here and there, but it's nothing compared to the amount of virus that would leak out if there was no mask during regular breathing. So, because when someone is sick with the influenza and going to see a doctor or going to the emergency room, of course, the people around you might look to be healthy, but you never know. Someone sitting nearby might be taking care of a young infant at home, or taking care of a relative, or being close to somebody who's older as well. And they might be on chemotherapy, they might have HIV, they might have something else going on with their immune system, or they might be in early stages of pregnancy. You never know what's going on with the people around you. And so please take it both as a courtesy, but also as a life-saving measure, potentially, of not infecting the people who are sitting around you, or your healthcare workers, or all that stuff. Because when a healthcare worker goes down, it's pretty troublesome to take over that in general. So that's one of the reasons why healthcare workers are one of the frontline people to get the flu shot. Had the flu shot every day, every season for how many years now? Many years. And I gotta say, over the years, they've actually seemed to have improved the flu vaccine. Many people, when they get the shot, they feel like a little bit down and run down and things like that. And I've noticed just to myself that the effect of that seems to have lessened over the years. So, at any rate, so when they say the flu shot this season is only 28% effective, I often hear patients say, so that means it doesn't really work. Why would I get myself sick or uncomfortable from a vaccination because I've been told I should get it, so why should I get it if it's only 28% effective? Well, because out of 100 people that get the shot, 28% of them, or 28 of them, will have no symptoms of the flu if they get exposed to it. So it's a 1/3 chance almost of not getting anything at all. And then the rest of those people, very, very often, if they do happen to get the influenza virus after they get the vaccination, they don't get nearly so sick. In other words, they really don't look as if they're dying when they come into the office. So the short version of it is, yes, it is not 100% guarantee, but nothing in life is 100% guarantee. Even our regular immunizations, like measles, mumps, rubella, and all that kind of stuff, there's always a few people that never quite make it fully immunized against the particular thing they're trying to get vaccinated against, which leads to the next part of the topic. So what are some things you can do to improve your odds of these vaccinations working in your favor? So to that, yes, Joe, about somewhere 28 to 30% is about what I've heard lately. Obviously, we'll know for sure how effective the vaccination is after the flu season has finished and after they've tallied up all the cases and the reports. So there's always a little bit of lag time to figuring out how effective these things are. So there was some really neat research that Dr. Greger on my favorite website, nutritionfacts.org, reported on. So to find this, just go there and look at the influenza topics. And there's not a summary there yet. Probably in the near future they'll have a little bit of a summary section for it. But meanwhile, so there was some interesting things with regards to wakame seaweed. So basically, wakame seaweed is the type of seaweed that if you go to the grocery store, you might, or some of the Asian restaurants, for example, occasionally you'll see something called seaweed salad on the menu. And that is wakame seaweed. It's also a common ingredient in miso soup as well. Now, what they did was they gave some folks about 2 grams of powdered wakame, and part of the reason why they gave them, instead of giving them an actual seaweed salad kind of thing, they had to dry it up and powder it and put in a capsule, because if you're trying to do a real controlled study, it's kind of hard to do a control for a seaweed salad, because usually when people are eating it, they kind of know that they're eating seaweed. Whereas if you are able to crush it and put it into a pill, and then it's hard to know whether you're getting the seaweed or a sugar pill. And so it's a little bit easier to do a controlled, randomized, study, that sort of thing. So anyway, these folks, basically, the short version of it is it was found to boost the immune system response to the vaccines. In other words, the likelihood that the body was going to rev up a good immune response to the vaccination was actually much improved in the folks that had had the wakame for a few weeks prior to getting the vaccination. So that's something that you can do to help boost your chances of the vaccine actually working for you. So make the odds better in your favor, as it were. So in general, there is also a lot of information out there about how the fruits and vegetables, in particular, the whole food plant-based pattern in general, because it's just absolutely loaded with fruits and vegetables, also tends to help increase the immune system response. So, for example, if somebody is very much having almost zero fruits and vegetables, and unfortunately in our culture, it is actually terribly common that people have no fruits and vegetables. Occasionally patients are like, "What, you want me to eat fruits and vegetables?" They look at me as though it's the most terrible thing, ever. So I apologize to those of you who are anti fruits and vegetables, but even having a few servings of fruits and vegetables, one of the bottom line goals to aim for is about 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. Ideally, for cancer prevention and stuff, you want like 9-ish servings of fruits and vegetables a day. But basically, the just general fruits and vegetables is very good for improving your immune function. When they were looking at other things, risk factors for folks that were getting hospitalized and more trouble with the flu, in regions where for every higher rates of obesity also led to a higher rate of hospitalization, and also folks that were not moving very much. So those of us that are sedentary, especially all of my, as we call it, desk jockeys, people who are sitting behind a desk staring at screens or sitting on a TV couch or immobilized in a nursing home, for example, not moving the body also led to higher rates of hospitalization and stuff. So, a lot of preventative medicine, it really boils down to some very simple kinds of things you can do for your health. Move the body, relaxation. So people who tended to be a little bit less anxious or a little bit happier tended to have better immune system functions as well. And then just generally speaking, eating your fruits and vegetables can be very good for boosting the immune system. And of the fruits and vegetables, there are a couple that are also especially outstanding at helping the body to get even better at reducing inflammation, but at the same time improving responsiveness. So, for example, there is something called green tea out there, and I've got a little demonstration. So when I tell people about green tea, it's one of the healthiest beverages on the planet besides just plain old water, right? And so people think, oh man, you gotta boil the stuff and it's gonna take forever and I really like green tea, blah, blah, blah. And basically, people think that it has to be a hot beverage. It doesn't. All you have to do is take some green tea, and just went to a restaurant tonight that actually had lovely Chinese green tea, and I've just drop it in the water, boom, and within a few minutes the tea will steep the water, and it turns out to be here, I'm going to just do it for show and tell tonight. So ta-da! That's how easy it is to make tea. All you need is some version of tea, some version of water. It doesn't have to be hot water, it could be cold water. And just let it sit for a little while. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, depends on how strong you like it and so forth. But if you take something like this, and it doesn't have to be fresh tea leaves, I just thought it'd be prettier than a tea bag, but any old, cheap old, here's an example from our local grocery store, anything that says green tea. You just stick it in water, let it soak for a while, and boom, you've got the anti-cancer, weight loss benefits, antiviral benefits, all sorts of really, really good health benefits coming from just a basic infusion of the green tea with water. So anyway, so if you take something like that and very simply gargle with it, it is one of the few things that has been shown to help with boosting the immune system, but also fighting virus particles specifically. And again, green tea is one of those topics that we probably should have a whole show just on green tea because it is just that amazing. But the folks that were gargling with green tea decreased the risk of flu infection specifically about 6 to 8 times. And that was compared to just plain old water in the nursing home group. So when they did the study and were looking at folks that were in the teenage years, they did not see quite as dramatic of a change as the folks that were sedentary and sitting in the nursing home. But even in the younger population, gargling with just plain old water reduces the risk of getting viruses like colds and influenza by about 30%. So why not hedge your bets? You can gargle with the stuff, you can mouthwash your mouth with it because it's got antibacterial properties too. And you can also, for very cheap, help prevent the influenza virus. Let's see what else we got. So there's also some very interesting stuff with regards to cruciferous veggies, and that's a big, as my friends call it, expensive word, for a category of fruits and vegetables, including broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli sprouts, for example. Basically, for every when folks were eating 2 cups or more of that category, they actually had a 20% reduced risk of dying compared to people that consumed 1/3 a cup or less of that category. And so it's a very neat category of stuff. The broccoli specifically is another superfood with tons of anti-cancer and other health benefits, helps detox the liver and all sorts of cool stuff. And it also helps to improve the immune function. There's a neat presentation on nutrition facts about basically it being applied to both smokers because they have even just a little bit of cigarettes basically creates so much inflammation in the body. So one of the markers for inflammation is a thing called CRP. And shockingly, even one day of smoking potentially can cause that increased inflammation for up to 30 years after you quit. So far better to never, ever, ever start with that stuff in the first place. It's extremely damaging to the body, unlike the green tea, which is helpful. So pick your plants wisely, as it were, things you want to, lifestyle habits for life. Anyway, so what they found with the broccoli in that category was that basically it was really, really good at helping to drop the inflammation, but improve the immune system response, especially like in the nose and the sinuses and stuff, so that people would be less likely to get ill with that. And if you want the most concentrated source of these anti-everything, cruciferous vegetable awesomeness compounds, then the best place to find those is actually in broccoli sprouts. Now, I did not happen to bring my sprouting jar here, but it's actually extremely easy to grow these kinds of sprouts at home. All you need is a wide open mouth jar and a package of broccoli seeds and a little bit of water and a little bit of time and patience, and obviously following the directions on how to do it. But it actually is a kind of a fun thing to do at home if you ever feel so inclined to play with it. So All right, so we covered a few various kinds of foods in particular that are good for helping to fight off the influenza virus. As everybody knows, if you get the flu, please do everyone else in your neighborhood and area a favor and stay at home, rest. Here's my other visual for the day. Get yourself all wrapped up nice and cozy and warm in a blanket. Get your green tea, all of that kind of stuff. Oh, thanks. There we go, even more props. So get yourself all nice and cozied up, and maybe send somebody else out to get your cough and cold medications and things like that. So as far as medicines go, there is actually a couple of antiviral medications that we can prescribe. The biggest things really, though, for most healthy people are fluids and rest and just kind of bundling up and taking care of yourself. Because basically the flu medicine that we have, the antiviral medicine, we tend to try to use that or reserve it for people who are more likely to die from the flu or who are having more severe symptoms. Because most of the general population, even though this year has got that H3N2 variety that tends to cause more severe symptoms than in some of the other years, because most people will get the virus, they'll muscle through it, and then they'll get better, and then next thing you know, they recover and thank you, and life moves on. But those most vulnerable people, we don't simply have enough antiviral medication that's made every year to give it to the entire population when we've got so much widespread flu. You really want to keep it for the people that are getting hospitalized as much as possible, with some exceptions, of course. And that's another reason to talk about it with your primary care physician. The other thing that's so important is just drinking fluids and fluids and fluids. Most of the over-the-counter medications do things like dry up, secretions and anti-fevers and other kinds of things. And with the fevers and everything, it's really, really super easy to get dehydrated, especially for the young kids. And especially if you're like vomiting and diarrhea and sore throat so that you really don't want to eat or drink and that sort of thing. So drinking plenty and plenty of fluids is vitally important. Every year I have to send a couple of kids at least to the local emergency room to get IV fluids, just because sometimes, especially for the little ones, it can be really hard to keep up the intake with how much of it is like getting sweated off and breathed out and everything like that. So just a few things. I mean, every year 3 to 5 million people end up with the flu across the world. And the updated numbers from the CDC, 291,000 to 646,000 basically perish or die from the flu every year. And the ones that catch people by surprise are the seemingly young and healthy, and they got everything going for them, and feeling too healthy to ever get a flu shot because they're just that young and never getting problems. And guess what? Sometimes those are the folks that end up occasionally dying. I think we've had, from the last news report, I think it was about 30 children that have died in the U.S. This season alone from the influenza virus. The folks that tend to die the most are, again, the folks that are 75 and older, and then the 60 to 64 range, and then some of the younger children end up passing away. And Bob here is asking for my thoughts on the flu shot. You missed my early part of the presentation, but yes, I will repeat it. I do recommend the flu shot, not only because it could give you a little extra protection against the flu virus if you do happen to catch the flu. And by the way, the flu shot does take about 2 weeks for your body to really ramp up its immunity from it. And so if you happen to be sitting next to somebody in the hospital or vaccination clinic or the grocery store, because of course, where would you go when you've got the flu? But places like Walmart and the grocery store and things like that, because you got to get medicines, right? And so you end up walking around and inhaling and exhaling all those germs to all of the people around you and touching things. And, that's why wash your hands a lot in the wintertime, not just for norovirus and such, but also for other things. Colds are more spread, they think, by touch than flu. Flu is more inhaled droplet kind of stuff. But anyway, getting into the details there. But yeah, so even the folks that do get the flu vaccine, in my experience with patients, they tend to, if they do get a related strain of the flu, it doesn't knock them out of the park. They get a little sick. They might feel a bit more like they've got just a really nasty cold. Oh, oops, yeah, it turned out to be the flu kind of thing, rather than the people who are looking like, not quite death warmed over, but, you get a sense when you look at somebody like, oh, yeah, they're just a little sick versus, oh, yeah, they're suffering on there after a while of gone there. So yes, Joe, if you don't get around anybody with the flu virus, then But I'm not recommending that people go hide in caves. This is not a total isolation message, but precautions. And the biggest message, of course, is for the people when they have the virus. See, Americans, we just have a tendency to be very independent, and I'm not going to ask for help, and they really need me at the office kind of people, right? So they're feeling a little bit down. Oh, I can muscle through it, and then they show up at the office, and then they spread their droplets to like all sorts of other people as well. So basically, stay home for at least a week when you have this particular thing. Call the office, take the paycheck, whatever you got to do, but basically, this is not something that we need to be spreading around as much. Alrighty, I think that's about all I got for this episode. I'm going to put in the comment section a few other things. If you want to keep up to date with the latest in statistics, the CDC does a wonderful job every year of tracking the outbreaks of flu across the country. If you ever want to learn, Dr. Greier's got a wonderful educational thing about influenza and factors that might lead to the next really pandemic. And basically, when the flu virus crosses species, and it's something that's brand new that humans have never ever seen before, like bird flu or like that swine flu that came around a few years ago. See, when people are a little bit older, they often have been exposed to kind of similar versions of things over the years, and so they got a little bit of extra immunity sometimes. And so, like when the swine flu came, the people that were the hardest hit were actually our young, healthy people, especially the pregnant ladies. I had several that year that had to get hospitalized because when the flu kills people, it is mostly because they have underlying conditions like asthma, heart disease, and stuff like that, and then they get a heart attack that's been triggered by the flu, or the asthma really flares up, or they get another infection, like they get a pneumonia, bacteria on top of the influenza virus, that sort of thing. And this is what makes these cross-species flu so dangerous, is our own immune system is really, really good sometimes at fighting off things. The only trouble is when it goes into hyperdrive, then it destroys your lungs and that sort of thing. And that's really not very good for you. So when the immune system response goes into hyperdrive, and it really goes into hyperdrive with some of these absolutely novel, we call it flu viruses, that's when people can go from being relatively healthy to literally dying within a day or two or hours, depending on the strain. I was reading an article about the, 1918 pandemic, and with that was a brand new flu virus that the human population, as far as we know, had never been exposed to, and within a few months or something, some huge number of people died from the influenza. So hope is high that we're going to have a universal flu vaccination in the relatively near future. They keep talking about it where instead of targeting the part of the virus that changes and mutates and switches itself up like constantly, there's like a little stalk or something that doesn't change that frequently that they're targeting for the new one. So keep your ears peeled. Maybe, hopefully, in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll probably have another announcement saying, "Yay, it's here!" But we're not quite there yet. So eat your fruits and veggies. Take care of yourselves. Meditate, relax, get some sleep, and exercise. The basic kinds of things doctors have been talking about for like, I don't know, a long time, right? So thank you for joining us for this episode of the Doc Talk tonight, and we'll see you next time. Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.